The night was too quiet for a woman who had just lost her father. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of the luxury penthouse, snow fell slowly, turning the city lights into trembling golden spots. Allison sat on the edge of the sofa, clutching the phone in her fingers, its screen still glowing with the last message. "Your father died today at 6:40 p.m. Our condolences. Period. Just one line. One cold strike that destroyed an entire life." She wasn't crying, not yet, as if her body still wouldn't let her heart believe what had happened. Inside her, the baby stirred, and Allison automatically placed her palm on her rounded belly. "Everything's fine, baby," she whispered in a trembling voice, even though she already knew nothing would ever be fine again. Viktor Sterling was a man feared by cabinet members, bankers, and the owners of Europe's largest corporations. The press called him the invisible trillionaire because nobody ever knew the real size of his fortune. He owned oil companies, international funds, private islands, and tech conglomerates hidden behind dozens of offshore accounts. But to Allison, he was just Dad. Strict, cold, sometimes almost cruel, and yet the only person who had never betrayed her. The phone vibrated again. This time it was her husband. Allison answered slowly. "Yeah, where are you?" Marcus's voice sounded irritated, as if she were late for dinner, not mourning her father. "At the apartment." "All right, I'll be there soon. We need to talk." Something in his tone made her blood run cold. 40 minutes later, the door opened. Marcus walked in without his usual kiss, without a hug, without even looking at her. He took off his coat and walked silently to the bar, pouring himself a whiskey. Allison slowly stood up. "You already know." "Yeah," he answered shortly. "And that's all you have to say?" He took a sip and looked her in the eyes for the first time. But there was no love in that look, only exhaustion and something else. Calculation. "Allison, we need to be adults." She felt everything tighten inside her. "What do you mean?" Marcus slowly exhaled. "I'm leaving." For a few seconds, she just stared at him, not grasping the meaning of his words. I can't live like this anymore." "Now you're saying this now after my father's death?" "Exactly now," he said coldly, "because now everything has changed." She let out a nervous laugh. "I don't understand." Marcus set the glass on the table. "Your father kept me tethered to you. You think I didn't know? You think I didn't realize that without him, all of this would collapse?" He swept his hand across the apartment. "The cars, the career, the contracts, everything was because of him." Allison's hands slowly began to shake. "You were with me for the money." He looked away, and that was enough. The world inside her caved in without a sound. "Is there someone else?" she added quietly. "For a long time now." The air seemed to vanish from the room. "Her name is Chloe, and I love her." Allison instinctively pressed her hand to her stomach. "And our baby?" Marcus looked at her stomach as if he were looking at a problem, not his own son. "I'll help out financially." She felt a wave of nausea. "Get out! Don't make a scene, just get out!" Her screams shattered against the glass walls of the penthouse. Marcus silently grabbed his coat and left. He just walked out. After 5 years of marriage, after the vows, after the baby, after her father's death. Allison slowly sank to the floor, not noticing the tears finally starting to stream down her face. She cried for a long time, the way people cry when everything is taken from them in a single evening. By morning, she was still sitting by the window when the doorbell rang. On the threshold stood a man in his 60s in a perfectly tailored black suit. "Good morning, Miss Sterling. My name is Arthur Vance. I was your father's personal attorney." Allison let him in without a word. He looked at her carefully and said quietly, "Your father left instructions in the event of his death. I need to take you somewhere immediately." An hour later, they were driving down an empty highway outside the city. The snow was falling harder. "Where are we going?" Allison finally asked. "To one of your father's estates. I didn't know he had a house out here." The lawyer gave a faint smile. "There is a great deal you didn't know about your father." Massive black gates slowly opened in front of the car. As the vehicle pulled onto the property, Allison froze. Looming before her was a massive mansion looking more like a palace. Behind it stretched acres of forest, artificial lakes, helipads, and security quarters. "What is this?" "This is your home, Ms. Sterling." "No, there's some mistake." Arthur pulled out a folder. "According to Viktor Sterling's will upon his death, you become the sole owner of assets with a total value," he paused, "of approximately $1 trillion. Silence. Allison stared at him without blinking. "That's impossible. Your father hid the true size of his wealth even from the government. Now it all belongs to you." Her heart beat faster. "But why didn't he ever tell me?" "Because he was afraid of exactly what happened yesterday." She slowly sank into a chair. Marcus. He had walked out thinking she was left with nothing, and suddenly, for the first time all night, Allison didn't feel pain. She felt a cold, dangerous calm, almost icy. Arthur placed another envelope in front of her. "Your father asked me to give this to you personally." With trembling fingers, she opened the letter. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and it means the people around you will finally show their true faces, especially the man you called your husband. Do not forgive betrayal, Allison. Never. Period." She closed her eyes and then asked slowly, "Does Marcus know about the inheritance?" "No, not yet." Outside the window, the snow swirled slowly, and for the first time all night, Allison's lips twitched into a faint smile. A very dangerous smile. Because in that moment, she realized the man who had betrayed his pregnant wife for a mistress had just made the most expensive mistake of his life. Allison looked up at the lawyer. "Tell me my father left behind." Arthur slowly opened the folder, and for the next 2 hours her life flipped upside down over and over again. Swiss accounts controlling stakes in international corporations, private equity funds, secret assets in Dubai, London, Singapore, and New York. Even political connections that never made the papers. Viktor Sterling wasn't just a rich man. He was an entire empire. "There is one more thing," Arthur said quietly. He placed a photograph in front of her. In the picture, Marcus was walking out of a restaurant with a long-legged brunette in a red coat. The date stamp was from 3 months ago. Allison stared at the photo for a long time. No tears, no hysterics, just a slowly growing emptiness inside. "Your father knew about his affair," the lawyer said. "He started investigating Marcus almost a year ago, and he didn't tell me anything. He wanted you to see the truth for yourself." Allison gave a bitter laugh. "I saw it." She was about to hand the photo back when she noticed something strange. A ring was sparkling on Chloe's hand. A very familiar ring. Allison's heart stopped, because it was her mother's ring, a piece of jewelry that had vanished from the family safe a month ago. Allison slowly held the photograph closer to the light. There was no mistaking it. A teardrop emerald surrounded by rare black diamonds, a custom piece made decades ago. Her father had given that ring to her mother on Allison's birthday. After her mother's death, Viktor kept the jewel in a locked safe and never let anyone even touch it. And now it was on the finger of her husband's mistress. Something inside Allison finally snapped for good. "How long ago did the ring disappear?" Arthur asked quietly. "A month ago. My father was furious. He thought the staff had stolen it." The lawyer looked grimly at the photograph. "Which means Marcus had access to the safe." Allison remembered that evening. Marcus himself had offered to help her father carry some documents to the study. She had even been surprised why Viktor suddenly let him stay alone in his private wing of the house. Now everything was falling into place. Marcus wasn't just cheating on her, he was stealing. He used her, waited for her father to die, and all the while smiled at her over breakfast, kissed her before bed, and rubbed her stomach pretending to be a happy father-to-be. Her chest grew so heavy she had to take a deep breath. Arthur looked at her with concern. "You shouldn't be getting stressed. A little late for that." She shifted her gaze back to the photo. Chloe looked very young, beautiful, with that cold, defiant kind of beauty seemingly designed to ruin other people's marriages. There was something particularly unpleasant in her eyes, the smugness of a woman certain of her victory. Allison suddenly remembered where she had seen her before, at a corporate party 6 months ago. Chloe was working at Marcus's company back then as a junior marketing exec, a quiet, polite girl with an angelic smile. God, she had even talked to Allison, complimented her pregnancy, asked if they were having a boy or a girl. Nausea rose in her throat. "Do you have more information on her?" Arthur hesitated. "Yes, your father ordered a full dossier." He opened the next folder. Chloe Shaw, 26 years old, heavy debts, several defaulted loans. Before meeting Marcus, she was dating the married owner of a construction firm. After they broke up, she received a massive wire transfer. She's a hunter. She goes after rich men. "Looks like it." Allison gave a bitter smile. "And my husband was stupid enough to believe she actually loved him." Arthur didn't reply because the answer was obvious. Silence hung in the room. Outside, it was starting to get dark. The massive mansion felt almost empty despite the security and staff. Too much space, too much luxury, and too few people you could trust. Why was my father so sure Marcus would leave after his death? Because your father understood people better than anyone else, especially men who fear poverty more than losing their family. Allison slowly closed her eyes. Marcus always hated feeling small. Her father crushed him just by being in the room. Viktor had never considered him worthy. Now she understood why. He despised Marcus from the very beginning, didn't he? Yes, but he let us get married. Arthur gave her a long look. Because you loved him. Her heart squeezed painfully. Loved. How strange that the rapid passage of time turns a present feeling into a memory. Allison's phone suddenly vibrated, a message from an unknown number. She opened it and froze. It was a photo of Marcus and Chloe. They were sitting in a restaurant holding hands. Beneath the picture was a caption. "I hope you realize you lost. He finally chose a real woman, not a pregnant problem." Allison stared at the screen for a long time, then slowly smiled, not out of joy, out of something much more dangerous. "What happened?" Arthur asked. She silently handed him the phone. The lawyer frowned. "An immature mistake." "No," Allison answered quietly. "It's a gift." She stood up from the chair and walked over to the window. Somewhere far beyond the forest, the lights of the city flickered. The city where Marcus was probably feeling relieved right now, probably celebrating his new life with his mistress. He was probably certain he had gotten rid of his pregnant wife, leaving her without the protection of her powerful father. If he only knew. Allison touched her stomach. "Baby, your father just declared war on the wrong person." Arthur watched her closely. "What are you going to do?" She turned around slowly, and for the first time all day, her eyes held that exact same cold stare of Viktor Sterling that even cabinet members feared. "First, I want to know everything about Marcus's company." "Already prepared." The lawyer handed over another folder. "His firm has been operating at a loss for the last year and a half. He's been hiding debts. Several contracts were only signed because of your father's influence." Allison opened the documents. The numbers were catastrophic. Marcus was drowning. And that was exactly why he had been so desperately looking for a new lifeline. "He thinks he can stay afloat without our family. Not for long." "No," Allison said quietly. "I don't want not for long. I want him to realize exactly what he lost." She closed the folder. "Tomorrow morning, set up a meeting with the board of directors for my father's holding company." Arthur slightly raised an eyebrow. "You want to take Viktor Sterling's place?" "It's already my place." There was a power in her voice that hadn't been there before. As if, along with her father's death, something else had woken up inside her. Something harder, something more dangerous. The phone vibrated again. This time it was Marcus calling. Allison stared at the screen for a few seconds, then answered. "Yes." His voice sounded unusually tense. "Allison, we need to talk." She let out a cold laugh. "Didn't you already say everything you wanted to?" Listen, Chloe posted a photo. It was an accident. An accident. Fascinating. He exhaled heavily. I didn't want things to look like this. And how did you want them to look? Ditching your pregnant wife 24 hours after her dad dies wanted to make it look classy. Silence hung on the line. Then Marcus spoke quieter. I know this is hard for you right now, but you need to think about the future, about the baby. You do realize that without your father's support, everything is going to get harder. Allison closed her eyes. He still thought she was left with nothing, and that was exactly what made the situation almost comical. Don't worry about my future, Marcus, she said calmly. You'd better start thinking about yours. What does that mean? She smiled slightly, watching the falling snow outside the window. You'll find out soon enough. And she hung up. At that exact second, Arthur received a notification on his tablet. He frowned. What happened? The lawyer slowly looked up at her. It seems your husband just tried to access one of your father's accounts, using his old power of attorney. Allison slowly turned to Arthur, and the lawyer swiped a finger across the tablet screen. The bank automatically blocked the login attempt. After Victor Sterling's death, all previous authorizations were voided. But the problem is something else. What? Marcus clearly doesn't know his access is revoked, which means he's confident he still has the right to manage your family's money. A cold smirk appeared on Allison's lips. He couldn't even wait for the funeral. It seems not. She walked over to the fireplace and stood there staring into the flames. Once upon a time, Marcus had seemed like a man who could never hurt her. He was attentive, patient, caring. It was with him that she first felt like a normal woman, not the daughter of a billionaire constantly shadowed by cameras, security, and ulterior motives. Now she realized something terrifying. Marcus had been studying her from the very beginning. Her weaknesses, her loneliness, her desire to be loved for herself, not for the Sterling name. And he played it perfectly. He married me before he even knew the real size of my father's wealth, Allison said quietly. Yes, but then he learned enough to stick around. Arthur's words sounded like a death sentence. At that moment, the phone lit up again. This time, the message was from Chloe. You do realize he never loved you, right? Men like him don't stay with pregnant women, especially when there's someone younger around. Allison slowly read the message twice, then suddenly laughed. A quiet, almost frighteningly calm laugh. Arthur looked at her carefully. Are you all right? More than all right. She looked up. This girl thinks she's won. Hasn't she? Allison walked over to the desk and picked up the folder with Marcus's financial reports. No, she just doesn't realize yet that she's tied herself to a man who is about to lose everything. Arthur gave a faint smile. For the first time all evening, he saw Viktor Sterling in her so clearly it sent a chill down his spine. That same calm gaze before a strike. That same icy control over emotions. What do you want to do? Allison slowly flipped through the documents. How long will it take to cut the funding to his company? If you sign the order tomorrow, a few hours. And the contracts? Most of them held up on your father's reputation. After the news of his death, investors are already starting to get nervous. She closed the folder. Good, then let's make them panic. At that moment, the study door carefully opened. An older woman in a dark blue dress appeared in the doorway. Excuse me, Ms. Allison, the doctor is here. Allison tiredly closed her eyes. She had completely forgotten that after the morning stress, Arthur had insisted on calling a physician. A few minutes later, a man in his 50s walked into the room. Good evening, I'm Dr. Lewis. He looked at Allison carefully. I was informed you suffered severe emotional stress. That's putting it mildly. The doctor sat across from her. You are nearly 7 months pregnant. He frowned. Under no circumstances can you be subjected to this kind of shock. Your blood pressure is already elevated. Allison gave a joyless laugh. I'm afraid my husband didn't consider that when he left me for his mistress. The doctor coughed awkwardly, clearly not expecting that level of bluntness. Right now, the main thing is staying calm, for the sake of the baby. For the sake of the baby. Those words echoed painfully inside her because beneath all the anger, the betrayal, and the inheritance hid a fear she was trying to ignore. She was going to be a mother. Alone, period. Without the man she had considered her family. When the doctor left, Allison sat in silence for a long time. The fire crackled in the hearth. The snow kept falling outside the windows. And for the first time in 24 hours, she allowed herself to think not about revenge, but about the future. Arthur. Yes. Do you think my father was ever actually happy? The question sounded unexpected even to her. The lawyer thought for a moment. I think after your mother's death, very rarely. Allison lowered her gaze. He always seemed so strong. Strong people get lonely too. The room sank back into silence, and suddenly Allison's phone rang again. The name on the screen flashed. Mother-in-law. She almost didn't want to answer, but pressed the button anyway. Lydia's voice sounded anxious and sharp at the same time. Allison, what is going on? Marcus isn't answering me straight. There are rumors online. People are saying you two split up. Allison tiredly closed her eyes. Your son left me for another woman. The line went dead silent. That after my father died, he decided it would be more convenient to start a new life. Lydia started breathing heavily. No, Marcus couldn't do that. But even in her voice, there was doubt. Because deep down, a mother always knows her son better than anyone else. Is he with her right now? The woman asked quietly. I imagine so. A few more seconds of silence, and then her mother-in-law suddenly whispered, Allison, he's an idiot. It was so unexpected that for the first time all day, Allison almost smiled genuinely. Probably. Listen to me carefully. Lydia's voice turned serious. Marcus has been acting strange these last few months. Nervous. He was constantly talking about money, about debts, about how tired he was of living under your father's control. I tried to talk to him, but... She trailed off. But what? I think this girl didn't just show up by accident. Allison tensed. What do you mean? I saw her once. By chance. She was asking way too many questions about your family. About Viktor's business, about the inheritance. I thought it was strange at the time. Arthur sharply looked up. You think she sought Marcus out on purpose? I don't know, but I had a bad feeling. Allison slowly sat up straight. Something inside her gave an anxious flutter. If Chloe was really hunting for money, then things could be much worse than they initially seemed. Because then Marcus wasn't the main player. He was just a convenient puppet. After the call with her mother-in-law, Allison stared at a single spot for a long time, then quietly said, Arthur, look into something for me. What exactly? I want to know where Chloe was before she met Marcus, who she talked to, who paid off her debts, and most importantly, she slowly raised her eyes. Was she connected to my father in any way before she showed up in our lives? A heavy silence hung in the room. Because for the first time, this story was starting to look like more than just a husband's infidelity. It was starting to look like something far more dangerous. And at that moment, somewhere downtown, Marcus was sitting in a luxury restaurant across from Chloe, completely unaware that in a few hours, he would receive news that would destroy his life forever. He nervously spun a glass of wine in his hands. Why are you so tense? He asked. Chloe forced a smile, but panic was rising inside her. Because for 20 minutes now, the same unknown number had been blowing up her phone. And finally, the phone vibrated again. This time, a text came through. Just one line. If Sterling finds out the truth ahead of time, you're a corpse. Period. Chloe turned pale. The phone nearly slipped from her fingers. Marcus frowned. What happened? She quickly locked the screen and gave a strained smile. Nothing. Work issues. But her heart was pounding so hard it felt like he could hear every beat. Marcus looked at her suspiciously. The last 24 hours had been stressful enough as it was. After leaving Allison, he expected to feel relief, freedom, maybe even happiness. But instead, a strange anxiety was growing inside him. especially after his conversation with his ex-wife. Her voice had sounded too calm, not like a woman who had just been dumped while pregnant right after her father died. And those words, "You'd better start thinking about your future, period." They wouldn't leave his head. Chloe reached for his hand. "Hey, it's all behind us now. We can finally live for ourselves." Marcus tried to smile, but at that exact moment, his phone vibrated violently. He looked at the screen and the blood drained from his face. "What?" Chloe asked warily. Marcus slowly looked up. "Our lead investor is pulling out of the project." "What? Right now?" He quickly opened the email. The cold official text announced the termination of funding for his company due to changed circumstances and internal restructuring. Marcus felt his stomach drop. This can't be happening. A second later, another email arrived, then a third. One by one, partners were severing their contracts. Chloe was looking at him, her previous confidence gone. "Why are they doing this?" Marcus stood up abruptly. "Because someone is squeezing them." And suddenly he realized who. Allison. No, that was impossible. She couldn't have that kind of influence. Or could she? Meanwhile, at the Sterling estate, Allison sat in her father's massive study. When she was a kid, she was terrified of going in there. The room always felt too cold, too serious. This was where decisions were made that decided the fates of companies, politicians, and billion-dollar deals. Now it was her study. Dozens of documents lay in front of her which Arthur kept bringing in one after another. "This is the list of companies controlled directly by the Sterling family," he explained. "And here are the hidden assets through trusts and funds." Allison slowly flipped through the papers. She still couldn't fully wrap her head around the scale of the inheritance. Entire nations had smaller budgets. "Why did my father hide so much from me?" Arthur stayed quiet for a moment. "Because he wanted to give you a chance at a normal life." Allison gave a bitter laugh. "Didn't work out too well?" "Perhaps, but he tried." She glanced at her phone screen again. Not a single new message from Marcus. And it was almost amusing. Yesterday, he thought he was the master of the situation. Today, his world was starting to crumble. But something else bothered Allison more. The message Chloe had received. If someone was threatening her, it meant there really was someone else behind this whole story. "Arthur, what did you find out?" The lawyer closed his folder. "Chloe showed up at Marcus's company 8 months ago. Before that, she lived in Chicago. Technically worked at a PR agency." "Technically?" "Yes, almost no actual clients. But there were massive wire transfers from a ghost fund." Allison tensed. "What fund?" "We're checking right now." Arthur's phone suddenly rang. He answered shortly, listened carefully to the person on the other end, and slowly turned pale. "What happened?" Allison asked immediately. The lawyer slowly lowered his phone. "One of your father's former security contractors wants to meet with you in person, and he claims Viktor Sterling's death might not have been an accident." The room seemed to grow colder. For a few seconds, Allison just stared at him. "What did you say?" "His name is Isaac Miller. He worked for your father for almost 15 years. After Viktor died, he vanished. Today, he made contact." Allison's heart hammered heavily against her ribs. "Did he explain why he thinks it's murder?" "No. He only said talking on the phone is dangerous." Allison slowly stood up. "Where is he now?" "He wants to meet tomorrow morning." She walked over to the window. The snow kept slowly blanketing the woods around the estate. A terrifying puzzle was starting to piece itself together in her head. The affair, the attempt to access the accounts, Chloe's strange appearance, and now the possible murder of her father. Too many coincidences. "Arthur, the official cause of death, heart attack. My father never had serious heart issues." The lawyer silently looked away, and that was enough. A new emotion began to rise inside Allison. Not pain, not resentment. Rage. Cold, terrifying rage. At that moment, somewhere downtown, Marcus was practically screaming into his phone. "What do you mean the board is demanding an emergency review?" His CFO's voice trembled. "Marcus, the banks are pulling our credit lines. We have nothing to cover the payouts." "Is this temporary?" "No, it looks like someone is intentionally destroying the company." Marcus whipped around to face Chloe. She sat pale, gripping her phone tightly. "It's Allison," he breathed. "She decided to get back at me." Chloe swallowed nervously. If he only knew the truth, if he only knew that Allison wasn't the main problem. Her phone vibrated again. A new message. "You were supposed to keep him on a leash. Now everything is spiraling out of control. Period." Chloe felt genuine terror, because for the first time in a long time, the man sending these texts was starting to make mistakes. And men like him didn't forgive mistakes. "Marcus," she said quietly, "we need to leave." He glared at her in frustration. "Now is not the time for hysterics." "You don't understand." "Then explain it to me already." Chloe opened her mouth but suddenly stopped, because if she told the truth, it would be over for her. For Marcus. Maybe for both of them. Meanwhile, back at the estate, Allison walked into her bedroom for the first time since she arrived. Her scarf was still lying on the bed left there days ago. Next to it was their wedding photo. She slowly picked up the frame. In the picture, Marcus was looking at her with such love that it now seemed like an absolute masterclass in acting. How long had he been lying? Months, years. Did he ever love her at all? Suddenly, the baby kicked inside her again. Allison closed her eyes and carefully touched her stomach. "I promise you," she whispered softly, "I won't let anyone hurt us." And at that moment, headlights flashed outside the window. Arthur immediately stepped into the room. "Miss Sterling, what's wrong?" "Security stopped a car at the main gates." "Who is it?" The lawyer hesitated. "Your husband." Allison slowly lifted her head, and then for the first time that night, she truly smiled. Because Marcus had arrived too late, and he didn't realize yet that the woman he had dumped yesterday had ceased to be the old Allison. Period. "Is he alone?" Allison asked calmly. "No," Arthur answered. "He has 2 guards with him." She let out a cold laugh. "Does he really think he can waltz in here with his own security?" "Our guys already disarmed them at the gate." For a few seconds, silence hung in the room. Then Allison slowly set the wedding photo back on the nightstand. It was strange, but she didn't feel anything anymore looking at their happy faces in the frame. No pain, no love, just the feeling of a stranger's life. As if that woman in the white dress was someone else, a stupid girl who still believed in promises. "Let him in," she finally said. Arthur looked at her carefully. "Are you sure?" "More than sure." A few minutes later, Allison was sitting in her father's study. The lights were dimmed, the fireplace crackled quietly, and the massive windows reflected the falling snow. She had chosen this room on purpose. Viktor Sterling's study had always intimidated people, and Marcus was no exception. When the door opened and he walked in, Allison immediately noticed the change. In just 24 hours, his face had sunk, dark circles had formed under his eyes, and his movements carried the tension of a man who felt the ground vanishing beneath his feet. He stopped in the middle of the room, and for the first time in a long time looked not like a confident man, but a terrified one. "Allison." She watched him without a word. Marcus swallowed nervously. "You look beautiful." "And you don't." He looked away, trying to smile. It didn't work. "We need to talk calmly." "Didn't you say everything you wanted to yesterday?" "I was emotional, really." "Was the mistress an emotion too?" Marcus tiredly rubbed his face. "I made a mistake." Allison raised an eyebrow slightly. "Funny how fast people start calling betrayal a mistake when they start losing money. Which part was the mistake?" she asked quietly. "The cheating or the leaving?" He took a step closer. "Listen, after your father died, everything hit me all at once. I got confused." "No, Marcus, you just showed your true face." He clenched his jaw. "Fine. Yes, I'm guilty. But we can fix this." Allison almost laughed. Fix this? How convenient, especially now that his company was disintegrating before his eyes. "Are you here to apologize?" she asked. Marcus stayed quiet, and that pause told her everything. He wasn't here for her. He was here to save himself. "What is going on with my contracts?" he finally asked. There it was. No remorse, no love, just business. Allison slowly leaned back in her chair. "Your contracts? Don't play games with me, Allison. Someone is squeezing my investors. And you decided it was me. Who else?" She stared into his eyes for a long time, then said calmly, "You really underestimated me this entire marriage." Marcus tensed. "So it is you. You're destroying my company." "No, Marcus. You destroyed it the moment you decided to betray the only person keeping you afloat. Period." He stepped closer aggressively. "Your father is dead. You have no idea what game you're playing." And then happened the one thing he didn't expect at all. Allison smiled, slowly, dangerously. "No, you have no idea." She opened the folder lying on the desk and tossed the documents in front of him. Marcus frowned. "What is this?" "The financial report for your company." He flipped through a few pages, and his face began to drain of color even more. "Where did you get this?" "I have access to everything now, Marcus." He snapped his head up. "What does that mean?" Allison calmly stood up, and for the first time in the entire conversation looked down at him. Just the way Victor Sterling used to look. "It means that after my father died, I inherited everything." "What?" "Everything, Marcus." He gave a nervous laugh. "Don't make me laugh. $1 trillion. International holdings banks funds controlling stakes in major corporations." With every word, his face grew paler. No, Victor couldn't have." "He could, and he did." Marcus recoiled so sharply it was as if he'd been hit. "You're lying." Allison silently placed another document in front of him. The official confirmation of the inheritance, complete with stamps, signatures, and legal codes. Marcus stared at the paper for a long time without blinking, and then whispered very quietly, "Oh my God." And at that exact moment, Allison saw genuine terror in his eyes for the first time. Not the fear of losing her, the fear of realizing the scale of his own mistake. He abruptly looked up. "Allison, listen to me." "No, now you are going to listen." Her voice turned to ice. "You dumped your pregnant wife 24 hours after her father died because you thought she was left helpless. You stole a family heirloom, cheated on me in my own house, and tried to access my family's accounts. A few hours after the funeral." Marcus was breathing heavily. "I wasn't in my right mind." "No, you were exactly in your right mind." He took a step toward her. "I love you." Allison looked at him with such terrifying calm that it chilled him to the bone. "Do not say that word in this house." Silence filled the study. Marcus suddenly collapsed into a chair and buried his face in his hands. For the first time through it all, he looked broken. "I've lost everything," he said hoarsely. Allison slowly stepped closer. "No, you haven't even started losing yet." He lifted his head, and at that moment the study door flew open. One of the guards rushed inside. "Ms. Sterling, urgent!" Arthur instantly tensed. "What happened?" The guard looked pale. "Isaac Miller's car was in an accident on the way here." Allison felt a cold drop in her stomach. "Is he alive?" The man hesitated. "The car was run off the road. It exploded." Silence. Marcus slowly pulled his hands away from his face. "What are you even talking about?" But Allison barely heard him anymore, because only one thought was hammering in her brain. The man who was going to tell her the truth about her father's death had just been killed. And it couldn't be a coincidence. Arthur quickly approached the guard. "Has the body been identified?" "No, the car burned completely." Allison straightened up sharply. "No body, no certainty." She turned to Arthur. "Send people to check the crash site personally." "They're already on the way." Marcus slowly stood up. Growing bewilderment was written all over his face. "Wait, You think Viktor was murdered? Nobody answered, and for the first time all evening, real fear appeared in Marcus's eyes. Because suddenly the situation was no longer just family drama. If Viktor Sterling had actually been taken out, it meant there were people around them capable of killing for money. And at that moment, Allison's phone vibrated again. A new message. This time, no caller ID. You're next, period. Allison stared at the message for a long time without moving. You're next, period. Just 3 words, but they changed everything. Marcus slowly stepped closer. Who sent that? She silently showed the screen to Arthur. The lawyer turned stark white. We need to increase security immediately, period. But Allison was already thinking about something else. All her life, her father used to say one phrase. The most dangerous people aren't the ones who yell. They're the ones who smile while they destroy you. And now she finally understood what those words meant. Chloe wasn't an accident. Marcus wasn't the main player. Someone had been inching closer to the Sterling family through him for years. Someone had patiently waited for Viktor's death. And this person was starting to panic, because Allison had turned out to be nowhere near as weak as they had calculated. She didn't sleep that night. The mansion was drowned in an anxious silence. Guards patrolled the perimeter, and the light in Viktor Sterling's study stayed on until morning. Allison sat at her father's desk, going over the documents again and again, until she suddenly noticed a strange folder with no label. Inside was a single piece of paper, a photograph. In the picture, her father was standing next to a man whose face was crossed out with a red marker. On the back, in Viktor's handwriting, it said, Alexander Grant, never trust him, period. Allison's heart stopped. She knew that name. Grant had been her father's partner many years ago. Then he suddenly vanished from the business world after a massive scandal and a financial collapse. Rumor had it that Viktor Sterling had destroyed his empire over a betrayal. But that wasn't the most terrifying part. Beneath the photograph lay a second piece of paper, a list of wire transfers, millions of dollars sent through shell funds to Chloe Shaw's accounts. Arthur turned pale when he saw the documents. My God, it's him, Allison said quietly. Grant was behind Chloe this whole time. And at that moment, Arthur's phone rang. He answered, listened for just a few seconds, then slowly looked up. Our people found Isaac Miller. Is he alive? Yes, he managed to get out of the car before the explosion. They're bringing him here now. An hour later, Isaac was sitting in the study. His face was bruised, his jacket torn, his hands shaking. But his eyes were full of fear, not for himself, for Allison. Viktor was murdered, he said immediately. Silence blanketed the room. Marcus, who was still at the estate, snapped his head up. What? Isaac exhaled heavily. A week before he died, Viktor started suspecting a leak. Someone on the inside was passing along data about his accounts and assets. Chloe, Allison whispered. No, she was just the bait. You were the main target. Isaac looked at Marcus. They used you to get close to the Sterling family. Marcus turned pale. No, that's impossible. You think Chloe just happened to show up at your company, accidentally fell in love, accidentally convinced you that your wife and kid were ruining your freedom? Every word hit Marcus harder than a slap to the face. Isaac continued. Grant waited years for a chance to get revenge on Viktor, but Sterling couldn't be broken directly, so he decided to destroy him through his family. Allison felt an icy fury rising inside her. How did they kill my father? Isaac looked down. His personal physician was bought off. They were slowly slipping Viktor drugs that induced heart failure. It looked completely natural. Marcus slumped heavily into his chair. Now he understood. He wasn't some brilliant mastermind who had outplayed a billionaire family. He was an idiot who got used as a tool. And for what? For a woman who never loved him. At that moment, the door burst open. The guards practically shoved Chloe inside. She looked broken, tear-stained, terrified. Let me go, she screamed. But when her eyes met Allison's, the girl abruptly went silent. because standing in front of her was no longer a cheated-on pregnant wife. Sitting in front of her was the new head of the Sterling Empire. Cold, calm, dangerous. "Sit," Allison said quietly, and Chloe obeyed. She was trembling, truly trembling for the first time. "Grant threw you to the wolves, didn't he?" Allison asked. Chloe covered her face with her hands and burst into tears. "He said he'd kill me if I messed this up, so it's true. I didn't want your father to die, I swear. I was just told to seduce Marcus and get the account info." Marcus stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You never loved me." Chloe slowly looked up with tear-filled eyes, and her silence became the cruelest answer of his life. He broke right then and there, completely. The man who betrayed his pregnant wife for a mistress realized he had been nothing but a pawn the entire time. Allison slowly stood up. Despite her pregnancy, despite the pain, despite her father's death, she looked stronger than anyone in the room, the true daughter of Viktor Sterling. "Call the police," she said calmly. Chloe sobbed even harder. Marcus sat motionless, destroyed by his own decisions. Allison walked over to the massive window. Snow was falling slowly to the ground, painting the forest, the roads, and the entire world outside in white light. Her father was dead. Her marriage was ruined. Her old life was gone forever. But another heart was beating inside her, and for the sake of that little heart, she no longer had the right to be weak. Arthur quietly stepped closer. "What will you do now?" Allison slowly touched her stomach, and for the first time in a long time, her smile became genuine. Not cold, not dangerous, but strong. "What my father always taught me to do." She looked out at the snow-covered horizon. "I'm going to build an empire that no one will ever be able to destroy." Down below, the lights of police cruisers were already flashing. Chloe was being led away in handcuffs. Marcus was left alone in the massive room, realizing a terrifying truth. He hadn't just lost his wife. He had lost the only woman who ever truly loved him and traded her for his own destruction. Allison didn't look back again. Because some doors only close once, forever. This captivating story serves as a profound reflection on the illusion of material power and the ultimate endurance of the human spirit. At its core, the narrative delivers a timeless truth. The foundations we build on greed, deceit, and exploitation will inevitably crumble, while the structures rooted in authenticity, resilience, and inner strength will withstand the fiercest storms. Alina's transformation from a vulnerable, grieving daughter into a resolute leader reminds us that true wealth is never measured by a bank account, but by the depth of one's character and the courage to protect what is genuinely sacred. It teaches us to look beneath the surface of fleeting promises and to cultivate a discernment that shields us from betrayal, proving that the most profound victories in life are those born from reclaiming our own narrative. The human heart possesses an extraordinary capacity to regenerate and find its footing even when the absolute bedrock of its existence is violently stripped away. True strength is never the absence of deep pain, but rather the quiet, courageous decision to rise entirely transformed from the ashes of betrayal. We often blind ourselves to the profound reality that those who seek to exploit our kindness are merely projecting their own deep-seated poverty of spirit. When someone walks away from you because they perceive a lack of utility, they are actually doing you the profound favor of clearing a path for your authentic purpose. True power does not rest in the cold, unyielding accumulation of material empires, but in the fierce, unconditional protection of the innocent lives entrusted to our care. The masks people wear out of desperation for wealth will always slip when they believe there is nothing left to gain from you. We must learn to anchor our self-worth so deeply within our own souls that no external betrayal can ever truly diminish our light. Life has a poetic, inevitable way of dismantling the carefully constructed illusions of those who choose to live by deceit and manipulation. To face adversity with a calm, discerning spirit is the ultimate act of defiance against a world that expects you to break. Your value is inherently non-negotiable, completely independent of anyone else's inability to recognize, cherish, or honor your devotion. When doors close in life, even through the most agonizing heartbreak, they often lock from the inside to preserve your future self. Rising above deceit does not require matching the malice of your enemies. It requires embodying a dignity they can never hope to understand. The most enduring empires are not built with stone, steel, or currency, but with the quiet, unbreakable promises we make to ourselves. Trust the stillness that follows the storm, for it is in that precise space that your true path finally reveals itself. Ultimately, the greatest retribution we can ever offer to those who sought our downfall is simply living a life of profound, unshakable fulfillment. This story and the accompanying commentary are created and presented strictly for educational, illustrative, and entertainment purposes. The characters, events, and financial scenarios depicted are entirely fictional and intended solely to explore philosophical themes of human resilience, ethics, and personal growth. The contents of this response do not constitute legal, financial, psychological, or professional advice of any kind. No action should be taken based solely on the fictional events or personal reflections expressed herein. For actual legal, financial, or personal counseling matters, please consult with a qualified and licensed professional in the appropriate field.